All right, so we're back with Jesse Wilson, Warranty Legal, and this is the longer form of the interview, just to kind of dig into more facts on like why this space and why didn't you, I mean, it seems pretty posh to do the corporate legal route and like spend the time. Why do you want to break away from that, or was that valuable to you when you were kind of pursuing that path?
Yeah, so good question. I never would have described myself as an entrepreneur. And yet, throughout my career, I've had people tell me that consistently. And in my mind, that was someone that risked it all, had nothing, and just like jumped into something with, hoping and with a plan and gutting out and a bunch of hard work, and risking not paying the mortgage next month kind of thing. And I understand some people do that and they can do that successfully. I thought that's all it was. I've come to learn that it's not all that. So I spent the first 10, 15 years of my career at insurance companies, insurance related companies, being a doer. And while I graded against some of the politics and against some of the rigidity of structure that large companies frankly have to be manageable, those were the things that were my entrepreneurial side grading against those. However, what I learned and the education I got from those jobs was invaluable. No way that I could be doing and have the opportunity to create Warranty Legal, to make it successful without the 10, 15 years I spent in-house at insurance entities, additional almost 10 years at a large law firm. Same thing. I got so much exposure, so much education on just continuing to see a bigger and bigger picture, seeing a bigger and bigger perspective. I learned another person's perspective on the same business. So was able to develop from not just a subject matter expert, but just continued to try to widen my understanding of the industry that I was in. And insurance is enormous. So while they were some rough years in some ways, and now I understand an entrepreneur is someone that goes out and wants to create and vet something of their own. It doesn't have to be all at once. It doesn't have to be risking the whole farm, Thankfully, I was blessed with the opportunity to step into it more slowly, having doing some things part-time while I was enabled by a full-time job that was okay with me starting to do Warranty Legal and some things on the side. And so that was unique, but when it comes to the experience, I couldn't, one of the biggest things we trade on is our expertise and our credibility. For sure. Without the first 25 years of my career, learning insurance, learning the business of insurance, learning the regulatory structure of insurance, I would never be able to have that credibility. So very thankful for those big companies, but also now have a much deeper understanding of when people say, well, like you think like an entrepreneur, and it's because I think with agility. I want to think creatively. I don't want to be confined by how I got to do something just because. And it was all those things combined that I now see, and kind of like that was preparing me for this venture that I didn't start till 45, right? So that value to me, that experience was invaluable. I wouldn't even have the opportunity of what I'm doing without that, so I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because I think right now there's a lot of talking heads online that say like burn the boats, quit your corporate job, whatever, go out there and buy a business, even though you've never been in the space. And although we're smart people, jumping into a business like yours is very complex, and
right.
there's different things going on that, although it is non-sexy of warranty and doing that kind of
right.
stuff, but without that background, you would have been.
Well, here's a good example of that. So as I'm thinking now about leading and growing an organization, more than I'm thinking about executing legal work, I'm drawing back to when I was 32 years old at a large local insurance company, and they created a department for me to go run, embedded in operations. So it was a business unit and I moved from the legal team into this business unit, and I inherited 59 employees. I had managed one paralegal prior to that time in my life. And so I'm now drawing on what I learned from my HR department that's like, no, you can't just fire people because they didn't show up. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And no, here's how you create corporate structure or organizational structure. You create the boxes and the roles and responsibilities that you need. You don't put people and then say you're going to do this. You create the boxes. So all of these things that I'm now drawing on from 15, 16, 17 years ago, because I was at a big company that had a very robust and very good HR department, I started to learn about organizational design. And I was young and even more brash than I am now. And so doing 360s and doing DISC and getting feedback and understanding how people think differently than I do and how I need to adjust my communication if I'm going to be a leader to how they communicate if I want to be successful. I mean, all of these things that goes into building a company and doesn't have the first thing to do with what does the state of Wyoming require of an automobile service contract provider, though I know that as well.
Yeah, the blocking and tackling versus the culture of what a business is built around. Right.
So to your point on, the talking heads and the others that are just like, go buy a business. Like, well, have you led something before? There are a remarkable number of people that, we were talking about it earlier. It's like, what is a P&L? What's P&L? It's like, no, P and L, profit and loss.
Yeah.
Remember the first time I heard that phrase? Like, what is that? So by all means, I am an example of get out of the corporate and be like, you gotta know something. You gotta have some transferable skill set. Even if you've got a big fat wallet, you're gonna lose a lot of it if you don't know how to run a business, evaluate a business, lead people. I am learning to do all of those, but I can draw on experiences of the last 25 years where I've done pieces of that. Always growing and learning, but having some experience is critical. Know the business, or at least know business.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, a lot of the things you just talked about is like, what do you see Warranty Legal's competitive advantage in this space? Like you've mentioned that, the opportunity is essentially endless because there's so many different companies that sell service warranties, different things like that. What does the future look like for Warranty Legal?
So one of the things that I honestly have continually been baffled by over my career is that my focus and grasp of the business more than the law as a differentiator. And so what I learned is that a large number of lawyers, and if you're a lawyer out there, I encourage you to do this, know the business you support. Don't know the laws about it. Don't be a really good contract reviewer. Well, by all means, do those things, but don't do only that.
It's like table stakes, contract reviews.
Yeah, but I just continue to be shocked how surprised clients are of my command of their business. Like, they look at me and say, like, you could go run our business. I'm like, I hope I could. If I couldn't, how can I help you?
Yeah.
If I don't understand that. So as seemingly obvious as that is one of our big differentiators. Fortunately, I studied finance before I studied law. And I worked for a couple of years before I started law school. I think those just two minor things, for some reason, conditioned my brain to think like a business person first and a lawyer second. And I think it's chicken and egg maybe, but I was always just curious about like how does this all work together? How does this piece lead to this piece to lead to this piece to lead to this piece is something that has allowed us to understand the business and thus see ways that we can help more than someone that just is handed a contract and says, hey, does it say what I intended and does it have all the legal stuff in it? that's good legal work, and that's solid legal work, and that's that's not malpractice. That is good solid legal work. But if you know all these other things, the amount of times that a client comes to us with a question, and before giving a response, we ask 10 other questions, and then realize that you're not even asking the right question. And if we didn't have the depth of knowledge that we have about the business, we wouldn't have known those 10 questions to ask, and we would have delivered something, and they would have gotten what they asked for, but they actually may have been something better out there for them.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the futures, that's a couple of things that I want to do law different.
Yeah.
And one of the ways is to be absolute experts in the business we're supporting. So that's one of those ways of what the future hopefully looks like. We'll see.
I'll tell you, I deal with a lot of lawyers, and when it almost feels like doing the bare minimum and getting your hourly rate is kind of table stakes. And it's yes, I got what I needed. You reviewed my contract. You made sure that everything is X's and O's. But to your point, how do we cook in the value of people in relationships, and to where I don't feel like I'm a bother to call, warranty legal, and you're adding so much more value than what a traditional legal representative would.
Yeah, well, there's two things I think that I heard in there. What you said is, one, you talked about the billable and then filling the call.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things we try to break as often as we can is the billable hour model. We want to be just another member of the team. Because in the billable hour model, like it or not, the reality is you pick up the phone, the clock's turning. And every time you think about picking up the phone, you're like, is it worth X hundreds of dollars per hour for me to make this phone call? Man, that's an inherent conflict in the whole legal industry. And one of the things that we have done a decent job of being able to move away from with flat fee arrangements. Some of our best and longest lasting clients is we're on a flat fee, and it's you just call us.
Yep.
And it brings in the second part of it that you talked about, relationship, and the bigger value is when we're able to get over that obstacle of being afraid to pick up the phone because you're spending money. Then you start getting into just hey, I want to pick your brain on this. And that leads to something that allows the business to grow their business. And when they're growing their business and you're giving things and ideas and solutions that help them grow their business, they have no problem paying your legal fees.
For sure.
Right? And so they kind of go together, and I'm really fortunate and really want to stay in the space that I call business enablement. There's a lot of legal work out there that it's litigation's a good example. That's not, that's kind of make it or break it. A lot of times it can be the company can be on the line and you just have to spend what you have to spend. But even if you win, nobody's happy because you had to spend all that, and you may have avoided the ultimate catastrophe, but you still had a big catastrophe. So I'm thankful that we're in a space, and we want to always focus on being on spaces that we're enabling the growth of businesses. Because when you're enabling the growth of business, legal fees become moot, right? You're helping them grow, and they're growing exponentially more than what they're paying you in fees. So we, as we have developed relationships with our clients over years, we get an understanding of how they work and the volume of work. And so we set flat fees, and we just have an agreement to say, hey, we're tracking our time as normal. And if we're getting killed, we'll let you know that the work volume is way higher than we thought, or not that. And if you're not feel like you're getting value, let us know. Nobody calls us saying, I'm not getting value. Occasionally we get the volume of work wrong, and so hey, this is higher than we thought, but rarely that's not very often the case. And it really does, man. It's huge because you're developing the relationship, and we just want to be part of the team. We're part of their team that has a very niche expertise. And then back to my prior point, our command on the business allows us to ask questions to actually get them better results. And I'll give you an example. We do a lot of contract review, and for all kinds of different things of people in this space. And so we're reviewing the contracts like, hey, how is this getting handled? How is that getting handled? Like, oh yeah, it's getting done this way, so we need to market that. It's like, so I noticed you don't have a profit share in here. Oh, I can ask for a profit share? Why would you not? You're my client, they're not my client. And so just again, like, yeah, a lot of people have profit shares in this thing. Like, oh, great. And now they've got a profit share they never knew they had. They never knew they had the opportunity, they would never ask for. So, that's a fun one. A good niche example. I don't want to give away all the secrets, but in our space it's pretty common, but it's not everybody knows.
Yeah, so people are going to give me some grief and they're going to be like, Anthony, like non-sexy businesses, like being a lawyer is a very sexy space or whatever, but can you talk more specifically about like the end user of who calls Warranty Legal, who finds you out there? Because a lot of those are very non-sexy spaces whether it's automotive, whether it's all the spaces that I deal in.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that, like what you can share or kind of broad brushstroke.
Yeah, so, again, we have been able to methodically, through this approach of really being knowledgeable in the business, build a good relationships and a good reputation in the industry. So that's obviously something you always have to do by delivering good service, by delivering good outcomes and expertise. But we'll get called by anyone from some of the largest insurance companies in the country and world that insure warranty programs on the back end.
So like for my car, if I buy a vehicle, like what type of warranties?
So when you buy a car, good example. So this industry is really three main parts. You have auto, you have home, which is like a home warranty, and then consumer products, which is anything from your cell phone to your watch to anything you buy on Amazon.
So huge areas of
yes, massive industry, and so we'll get calls, say, in the auto space of, that, hey, if your car breaks down, we'll fix it for X number of things, or maintenance agreement, or they call them vehicle service contracts. Companies that offer those, big dealers typically have their own, but independent dealers will work with a third party. The third party has developed products. A lot of those third parties are our clients, so they're the administrators and the offerors of those products. So it's not the dealer's name on the contract, it's some other name. Those are the people we typically work with. And then a lot of times the risk associated with those is transferred to a big, large insurance company. Names that everybody in the industry would have heard about.
Gotcha.
We'll work with any one of those people in the process, either developing products or creating whole new companies, or coming up with new ways to create service contracts on products that people have not thought about, not a traditional product. For instance, like a software. Can you do a service contract on a software? Is a software a quote product? Does it fit within the regulatory box? Those are the other people that call us. Hey, I want to do X. It feels like insurance, smells like insurance, might be insurance, not sure it's insurance. I've heard people doing it this way. They say it's not insurance.
Yeah.
Can you help me? That's the other type of people we get calls from. I actually enjoy those the most. I just like being, because it like gives me my creative juices. I like taking, you've got, insurance and service contract regulatory construct that's been crafted over the course of 25 to 125 years. And as we know, technology changes things so quickly that new applications, you gotta re-scrutinize the same statute to say, no one, when they wrote this, they were thinking pens and papers, not AI. But how does it fit in? And how do we do that? So we get a lot of those calls too, just if anybody's got any kind of product that wants to create a warranty type program. And it may be an extended warranty, it may be a true warranty. Those mean different things under the law. I won't get into all that technical detail and bore you with that, but like that nuance of what am I? I've got this idea, I want to add this value to a customer, how do I do it?
Yeah.
And if it smells of risk transfer from one party to another, that falls in our world.
That's, like you said, there's a huge opportunity, home, auto, electronic software, like you're kind
Right.
of covering the gamut there. So, well, to kind of wrap it all up, one thing I'd like to touch on is like, how does your faith kind of come into play with a business like this? Like, and how you decided to jump into this very risky pool of entrepreneurship. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, that's a good question because, obviously as with everyone, I've matured in my walk and in my faith over the years. And one of the things I attribute most highly to sitting in the place I am with the opportunity before me is simply good financial stewardship. It doesn't have anything to do with like seeking the Lord and an angel coming down and saying, go in and send the warranties, right? I don't have that experience. But just, prioritizing with my wife, giving to the Lord, has been, I don't have any explanation, for why God has been gracious in this way, but I look at that and say that has always been a priority, despite how often I fail to live up to the standard God calls us to live. Biblically, financial stewardship has always been a priority with my wife and I feel like God has blessed that. And I take that into the business and being open and encouraging the business and the people around me. And I can't be generous on behalf of others. But just encouraging that generosity and that generosity even spilling into the business, where how you compensate people, how you do schedules and flexibility. There's a generosity component that can be a part of that would not otherwise be in a here's the maximum return business plan I can build. So I think that is one. One of the other areas is, as I have grown and continue to grow in my faith, is we recently established our core values and ended up with like getting feedback from my team, but we ended up with like people first being first. I would not have said that 10, 15, 20 years ago. I would not have built a business around people first. And that I attribute again to God working in my life in care and compassion and seeing people, not just seeing opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's something I've had to grow in. I spent a lot of years of my life being very transactional in relationships. And that's not what we're called to as believers. And so I'd say that is those are two of the biggest ways. The third one probably simply being in just stepping a little bit of a time at a time, but seeing God's hand in it continues to give you confidence, and just there's excitement, but there's not a lot of dread, which I think is the Holy Spirit working in peace, saying, "Hey, God is in this." I don't have a formula for that or how you know it, but there are days that are stressful. There are days that are not fun. There are days that I want to claw my eyes out. But there's an overarching joy and peace in what I'm doing that I have not experienced in anything else. And so I don't think I'm capable of manufacturing that myself. So I don't think I have any choice but to attribute that to the Lord and God. And I think it also then circles back to being, it drives me again still to be a good steward of it. Whether it's the people, whether it's the resources, whether it's what I take home and then giving, being a good steward of all of that is how I bring my faith in. The last piece I think is probably practical, and probably the one they've been thinking of that's last on my list is just doing the right thing with clients.
Yep.
This is there's a very gray area, and you have clients that are willing to completely ignore law. You have clients that don't want to even come close to unless it's explicitly clear coming closer, and there's a ton in between. And so navigating that with just truth and saying, hey, look, I can support you in this area. Here's the defenses I make. I think they would work. I don't think they would work. They've been tried. They haven't been tried. Like, we can still serve clients of every risk tolerance or avoidance level, because we're being honest, we're being forthright, and we let them make the ultimate decision. We educate them and provide as much as we can with them. You know, if someone tells us they're intentionally going to defraud people, well, then you don't work with them as a client. But that rarely happens. But that would be the last area, but I think that might be the one people might think is first on the list, but honestly, it's the last one I get to, because I really think it's those other things that don't necessarily have to do with the business plan, I'll call it itself, but how the Lord has worked in those ways.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time today. This whole video series is about helping folks understand the opportunities that are maybe hiding in plain sight, or these, I say, non-sexy, niche-y businesses that folks are going into and having a lot of success in. So that's really what I wanted to highlight today with your company. So I appreciate it.
Well, thanks. Appreciate the time. We're at the front end of this journey, and hopefully as we continue to be faithful, the Lord will provide and help us grow. But it's exciting and daunting and nerve-wracking all at the same time, but appreciate your time and talking to you. Be curious, ask questions, learn businesses. I love it. Keep doing it.
Thanks, man. See ya.
See ya.